Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 256. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest is Jennifer Hambrick. She'll be here in about 5 minutes. But before we get in, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been a continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Anything you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be greatly appreciated. Now, we're going to be joined, as we always do, by our Poet Respond poet to start out the show. And Katie Hartsock is here. This is her second time in Poet Respond, and the second time she's had a fun poem, which is always fun. And here she is, Katie Hartsock. Hi, Katie. How you doing?
Hey, Tim, I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you. And again, it is, we read through the submissions. We get maybe 150, 200 submissions for this every week. And anytime there's sort of an uplifting, heartwarming, kind of positive news story spun off, it stands out because, so much of the news is negative. There's all that negativity bias. It's what we're compelled to write about. So there's sort of a negativity bias within poetry itself, in addition to the news cycle's long-standing one, too. And so when we get to have a poem that's kind of fun and points out something nice about life, I like to jump at that opportunity. And you had a really fun one. So what was the poem? What was it you were inspired to write about this week?
My sons and I got some corn from a wonderful Michigan roadside farm stand this week. And the day before, I had read a New York Times article about how healthy sweet corn actually is, even though it gets a bad rap. And I say that with an asterisk because there's many people in the comments of the New York Times article who have things to say about that. But I'll just leave that aside because I also found out in the article and from the comments that a lot of people had fond memories of eating it raw off the cob, which I feel a little embarrassed to say blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah,
the ritual was like you shuck it and you have to cook it and butter it and salt it and pepper it, and it seemed like this accumulation. And it was just like, well, no, actually you could just eat it, and that just seemed amazing to me. And my sons and I did it, and a lot of other memories of immediate sweetness came into my mind, and the poem kind of just erupted out of all that. So
yeah. I mean, it's one of those examples too of how distant we are from our actual food so often. But I had the same reaction as you when I first read the poem. I was like, wait a minute, does she mean like eat it without butter? Is that what she means? Eat straight off the? Wait, no, you can just eat it off the cob. And then of course other people wrote back today and said, of course, what do you guys? You didn't know that? Of course you can eat off the cob, but. No. I didn't know either, and anyway, it was a nice poem and memory that this pulled up for you too. Do you want to go ahead and read it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Paragon. To eat sweet corn straight off the cob, just shucked. No one ever told me I could do that. Like, no one ever. Another day, the world seems too full of protocols, boiled and buttered and salted. How many times I sat with my grandfather by the front yard rock, where we hammered walnuts apart and shucked so many ears for the huge pot my grandmother watched inside, and never once, the son of tenant farmers, did he say, just eat it now, go ahead. He who loved immediacies, gifts that arrived unmediated, charmed with readiness. No, I had to read about it, and on I read, grieved, and grateful still for the world. So much hiddenness to live in. And stopped this afternoon to give one of two bonneted daughters a 10 3/1 and 3/4 for 7 ears of corn and a small bouquet of sunflowers, sticky with their stalk juice. A while later, and I never knew summer could be like this, undivided, as it always seemed in my youth, between cooked and raw, fun and boredom, never been kissed, and yes, healthy and light and shadows of television after dinner. I took sunflowers to my mother, who used to be one. Please God, may she be again. Then, in an unhurried rain, my sons and I sat on the front porch and shucked this corn, our shirts dampled with quiet, and I said, you can just eat it now.
Yeah, such a wonderful poem, and lovely to capture that experience in that moment. And that's really what, we live for, is those kind of little moments with our kids and when things matter like that. It's really nice to capture that with a poem. Thanks for sharing and for being the Poet of the Day today, Katie.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Tim.
Yep.
Thanks
Yep. Thanks. Take care.
for all the great work you do for poetry and looking forward to this conversation.
Ah, great. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, that was Katie Hartsock with today's poem, Paragon. Yeah, wonderful poem there. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Jennifer Hambrick. So sit tight, and we will be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Jennifer Hambrick. Jennifer is a classical musician, radio broadcaster, and poet with a PhD in musicology. That's going to be fun to talk about. Her full-length poetry collection, In the High Weeds, won the Stevens Prize. In her haikai work, Hambrick won the Martin Lucas Haiku Award and the HSA Haibun Award. Her Haibun collection, Joyride, won the Marianne Bluger Book Award from the Haiku Canada. Hambrick served as program chair for the 2023 Haiku North America Conference, which is where we met her. She resides in Columbus, Ohio, and her new book of haiku is right here, a powerful book, A Silence or Two. Here she is, Jennifer Hambrick. Hey, Jennifer, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm great, and it's great to have you on. I always love, especially I flew back from to Texas from California and had your book on the plane. I love reading haiku on a plane for some reason. Such a great place to kind of, you read some, you drift off out the window, you kind of come back, you meditate. It's a perfect experience. I had a real fun time reading A Silence or Two. So thanks for sharing that, and glad you're here.
Sure. Thank you. My pleasure. It's interesting to hear you. I never thought about haiku on an airplane, but why not? Sure. Yeah.
It's great, I think I get so few times where there's silence in life, I really enjoy the fact that no one's talking. I can't check my emails or get a text or any kind of interruption, and there's just that white noise of the plane, and then it kind of the haikus hum around, the little noise it's really nice. I like it. So but you have other poems too that are not in the haiku universe, sort of straightforward poems. You want to start with some of those. Let's start with Hands.
Sure. This poem, as you said, is called Hands, and I come from I would say a sort of Appalachian family. My mother was born in Kentucky. My dad was born in Virginia and moved to Kentucky when he was very, very young and considered himself a Kentuckian. So this poem is sort of from that aspect of my life and my work as a poet. And in the little bit about the direct inspiration for this poem, in the late 1920s, early 1930s, there was a photographer named Doris Ullman who was very famous about going to parts of Appalachia and also to the Gullah communities and the Sea Islands on the eastern coast of the United States, and taking, photographs of the people who lived in and worked in those areas. And she made her way to Berea, Kentucky, which is where my mother's father is from. And Doris Ullman ended up taking photographs of my great-grandmother, Lucinda Drew Lakes, or Lucy Lakes, as she's referred to in the title of the photograph that Doris Ullman took of her, caning a corn shuck chair in Berea, Kentucky. And so that's this photograph of my great-grandmother's hands, which Doris Ullman took as the inspiration for this poem called Hands. Her hands curve soft as a wooden spoon. The wrinkles at her wrists are growth rings etched into flesh like furrows in the field beneath the hills that watch the children she bore, the way the moon bears light from a source its beauty reflects. Before the dawn of each new life, she climbed to the attic, wet crescents under her eyes, and wordless brought down the chest of layettes and tiny cloaks and trousers she had packed away when the child she thought would be her last outgrew them. She was full of stories she could not tell. Light powders her sun-speckled hands as she twists corn shucks, blonde and crackling, into ropes for the chair where my grandfather, then my mother, breathed the words and silences that made us, the lore of reaping just enough to see another day, of the ones who died in birth or war, and the ones who ran away, their lives left lingering in the coils of time. I am full of stories I cannot tell, but my bones hum like a harrow hitting rock, melodies mingling in the half-light of someone else's memories. My hands twist the strands of each day's tunes into tomorrow's song. These hands hold that song. These hands let it go.
Yeah, great ending there, especially. That was Jennifer Hambrick with Hands, and love the story of where that poem came from. I also love the line, the concept of she was full of stories she could not tell, as a kind of, definition or explanation of what poetry is, maybe. Isn't that sort of what we're doing here, is finding a way to tell stories that we couldn't tell? Yeah, and it makes me wonder about your introduction into poetry and how much that is an influence for your work.
My introduction into my introduction into poetry, I came out of my work writing about music, to be quite honest with you. So as you mentioned in my introduction to this segment, I have a musical background, a classical music background, classical musician, a doctorate in musicology. There's this great saying, and I've seen it attributed to various people, and I actually don't know who actually said it, but writing about music is like dancing about architecture.
That's great.
And the thing is, when you write about music, which I did a lot of course, as I was working my doctoral dissertation, and then after I left academia, I started writing about music for the media, which I still do. But when you write about music, you in order to write, I think, vividly and compellingly and effectively, you have to move very quickly into metaphor and other types of figurative language. So all of my work, in poetry, writing poetry came out of that. It was really actually a very short hop from writing about music to writing poetry.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of talking to Katie Dozier about food writing, because she went to culinary school and was doing food writing and it's so hard to write about food, even though it's something that we have so much so much like, I guess it's the same thing. We have so much like visceral experience with both food and music that we don't speak about it like other than directly usually, and so it's hard to find new ways to say things. You have to pull into metaphor and make people see things that they can't experience directly through the writing.
Yeah. And it is about experiencing the food, and it is about experiencing the music. And, and of course, the other part of the equation here is the reader, who has to sort of experience the food, experience the music, experience the story in a poem vicariously in a way through you. So there's a real kind of responsibility, in a sense, to being true to the subject matter, but really also communicating that experience, and not just communicating about the experience, but ideally communicating something of the experience, something of the way it feels to be in a concert hall to hear Brahms' Second Symphony performed by a great orchestra, the way it feels, or to be having this wonderful meal. And so it's just really not enough to kind of write about something. You have to kind of write into something.
Mm.
But yeah, that's an interesting kind of comparison or analogy between food writing and music writing. I'm sure the processes are quite similar.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, writing into something. I really like that. So tell us about your background in music, and I'm curious about your PhD too. I don't really know. I've never got to talk to a musicologist before, but I think you studied classical music at the Eastman School of Music, which is familiar to me. I went to the University of Rochester for my undergraduate, and so I've spent a lot of time down there. And the amazing, I mean, you could go down the tunnel there, that long tunnel. You can go from the campus to the Eastman School of Music, and then. And so many amazing things just to go to some recital for, some graduate student doing these, like, one of the things I remember most was a cellist interpreting Birches, the Robert Frost poem, on the cello. And it just stood out so much. It's just blown away at the quality of the music there. So that's really cool. But what did you play, and what was your background in music like, first of all?
Sure. Well, at Eastman, I was a flute major, and my first professional career, I was a professional flutist, and then went to a graduate school to complete the doctorate in musicology. But I have to kind of dial back a little bit, even earlier in my life, because I would say that honestly, my sort of entree, if you will, into music was as a dancer. When I was very, very young. I was a really gung-ho, really avid dancer. And of course, I studied classical ballet and jazz and all, and all of that, but mainly classical ballet. And it's very common, for classical ballet classes, at that level, to be accompanied by a pianist who is playing, Chopin waltzes and so on and so forth. Piano transcriptions of Tchaikovsky ballet scores, or, parts of Tchaikovsky ballet scores and so on and so forth. And so I was really kind of, that was a really, I would say, embodied musical experience for me, my early years as a dancer. And so then when I started getting more interested in, becoming less interested in dance, maybe more interested in playing the flute, it's still, the experience of playing music, of course, was still very, very much embodied for me. And it has to be. And I think that's a piece that, like, musicians know. Musicians who, professional musicians or aspiring professional musicians know how physical it is to play an instrument at a really high level. But I think it's often not maybe quite understood outside of that circle of musicians, professionals, aspiring professionals, but it's extremely physical, and so if you are, you learn about music, you study music intellectually, you feel music emotionally, but you actually have to embody the music physically as well, and sometimes, use incredibly fine motor skills as well. So that, for me, that part of being a musician for me is actually something that also I feel transfers into writing poetry, as well as the sounds of words and the rhythms of words and so on and so forth. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, the beginning of, kind of my musical my work as a musician and how it kind of connects to my work as a poet.
Yeah, well, let's jump right to a question because Jimmy Pappas sort of had one that I was about to ask. He says, people keep talking about musicality in poetry. I'm never quite sure what that means. How would you define it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Musicality in poetry. Well, okay, from my perspective, I my ear as a writer, my ear actually often leads me through poems as I'm first writing them. Um, and by that I mean I can very often hear the rhythm of the words
Hmm.
in my mind, like I know that this will feel rhythmically good. I might not know specifically what the words are. So I make a note, as I'm sort of drafting a poem like longhand or even on my phone or on my computer, I'll sort of make a note that sort of indicates kind of in my own shorthand sort of what the rhythm in that particular place is going to be. And then I'll kind of keep drafting the rest of the poem so I don't kind of get hung up on one spot. So there's the rhythm of the words. There's also the alliteration, the assonance, and all of that, slant rhyme, the sounds of the actual kind of words individually, the sounds of words, certain words in combinations. But then there's also the question of the architecture or the form of a poem. And I think when we're talking about poems, in fixed, more or less fixed forms, like sonnets or what have you, um, the form is, more or less kind of given to us. Of course, we can take some liberties. But even outside of poems in fixed forms, if you will, free verse poems, good poems always have an architecture. They always have some kind of a form. And that is to me extremely musical.
Hmm.
Again, writing about music is like dancing about architecture. Musical works of music have very, very clear forms. I mean, from a Beethoven symphony or a Brahms symphony or a Mahler symphony or a Beethoven piano sonata or a Mozart piano concerto, all the way down to, the pop songs or the rock songs that you hear on the radio. There are very, very clear forms to good pieces of music, and good poems have that as well. In addition, a kind of freedom in a form.
Hmm.
And so all of those ingredients to me, in some combination or another, which is unique for every poem, and unique, for every poet, kind of add up to what I would consider to be, the musicality of poetry.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think about it all the time, and I think about it as like, like in classical music, a symphony, you have that the way that it plays out with different movements and motifs, and they call back to each other and add on to each other, and that's how the sounds work in a good poem. Like there'll be, you use this like hard or sound because you said floor earlier in the poem, and it kind of recalls back to that, and there's a whole shape and a structure, even in free verse, if we're really listening to the way sounds play out.
Mhm.
I always think of it too as like a dance within your mouth because each sort of phoneme and morpheme has a different shape that you're making and you're moving around and you're repeating these sort of steps like with your tongue and your breath and the rhythm of your heartbeat that you're timing it to too. And you see, I always mention this, but back when I did a reading series, I used to sit behind the readers, so I'd renounce them and they'd come up. And I'd sort of hide back behind off stage, and I could just kind of see their feet. And the best reader always has a little like tapping, kind of like moving around to a little bit of rhythm, and they could feel the music in their own poems as they were reading. And that was kind of one of the things that very clearly stood out is something that good poets have, is that sense of music playing in the poem itself. So it's
Yeah.
cool to hear the description of that.
Yeah, 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 and it works, of course, on multiple levels. Again, the individual word, and then the whole sort of formal structure of the piece. But it's all very musical, all very a musical experience. And of course, poetry from in the Western tradition at least is very very much down to sort of the beginning of the tradition, united with music. So their poetry and music are truly sort of sister arts.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's hear another poem. Do you want to do Spitting Downstairs next?
Sure. Sure. This is another poem sort of inspired by, my Appalachian family. This is actually inspired by my mother's mother. who lived in Kentucky her entire life. And when I was a kid, we used to go down to Kentucky from Ohio, relatively short drive to visit. And she lived in this apartment, which is described in this poem. And I kind of remember having these experiences in my grandmother's apartment. So this is called Spitting Downstairs. Third floor, Ishmael Apartments. No elevator, even on grocery days. I'm 7 years old and outside grandmother's door, looking down over the dark wood banister. And I spit straight down into its spiral echo around and around each flight of stairs, all the way down to the ground floor, all the way through black grouting between white hexagonal tiles, old like worn out chicken wire, to the barnyard and great grandmother wringing supper's neck, waiting for supper to stop flailing, reflexively flapping, waiting for supper to go silent. Spit splats a cold smack like limp flesh on hard white countertop, the only sound in the silence of the barnyard, stunned cluckless, as though every voice in solidarity with the one squeezed out the neck that held it tight, along with the one that longed for the length and breadth of the world beyond barnyard, beyond cast iron skillet, beyond chicken wire and porcelain tile, beyond banister, beyond sagging apartment, beyond the desperate silence of failed freedom, just beyond.
Yeah, so you can definitely hear all the music in that, and the way that music generates, pushes the poem forward. Like you probably wouldn't have said grouting in that poem if you hadn't had down to the ground in the line above. It's that repetition and rhythm and variation on repetition where the music lives. And I heard a lot of people talk about the music, especially with the formal poetry. Because it's so much easier to sort of set up, because so much is about setting up an expectation and then slightly subverting it and sort of thinking what's coming and then either affirming of that because it feels good to have that affirmed, or like altering that because it feels good to like recreate your models, And so a lot of times people talk about formal poetry in that regard. Do you ever work in form, or do you mostly stick to free verse? And if not, why not?
I mostly stick to free verse. I would say, if you consider haiku formal poetry, I work a lot in haiku, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that part of the conversation. But actually, the way haiku tend to be written and have tended to be written, I think, in the Japanese language tradition and the English language tradition since at least around, the year 1900. Really, haiku are more free verse. They're just very, very short free verse poems. So, but I actually tend not to write formal poems. I mean, I've written some ghazal, some ghazals, that sort of thing. But at the same time, I take liberties, with the form, and I think that's not unusual.
Yeah, yeah. So what was your PhD thesis in musicology? I'm really curious about that. And I don't even know what musicology actually is, except I can see music study of. So I kind of got that far. Yeah.
Yeah. So musicology, you could think of musicology as sort of like, there are different flavors, of musicology that go hand in hand with different emphases. But you could sort of think of musicology in the broadest kind of sweep as art history, but for music, So we, musicologists have to know how to get into a musical score and analyze a musical score. We have to have good ears. We have to have a good historical sense. We have to, read ourselves blind, right? Digging into the primary sources and the secondary literature, just like art historians have to, and so on and so forth. But my dissertation was on issues of drama and aesthetics in the 19th century symphony. And more specifically, I looked at French composer Hector Berlioz's Romeo and Juliet symphony, which Berlioz described as a dramatic symphony. And that was an important designation that particularly in the time and place in which he was working. He was working in the 1800s in Paris. Paris at the time was the opera capital of Europe. Paris had a tremendous, already by that time, tremendous tradition of dramatic music, music for the theater, opera, ballet, various other genres akin to opera, like melodrama, which is, music and acting and spoken text, and what was called opera comique, which also was music and spoken text, and just an incredibly rich tradition of dramatic music. And so, but Berlioz wrote a symphony that in some ways behaved kind of like an opera, but he didn't call it an opera. The problem is that a lot of the criticism on the piece really kind of described the piece as a failed opera. Mm-hmm. And that was an issue because it was sort of like, no, I mean, Berlioz was a better composer than to have sort of just said, well, okay, I wrote what I call the dramatic symphony, and it really was a failed opera, so let's, kind of go home now. So my dissertation kind of looks at what he really meant by dramatic symphony. Both of those words, dramatic and symphony, were kind of loaded terms in a way for him, writing again in the time and place in which he wrote. So I sort of tried to pull apart the various aesthetic strands that I argue fed into his understanding of the dramatic symphony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's fascinating here. I always, I know so little about classical music just in general, but I recognize so many names just from poems that they've been in. So we've had several poems about Berlioz. So I know a few random details, but so little about, I couldn't, pick them out of a lineup. But it's really interesting to hear that. So as you were doing all this in music, were you writing poems at the same time? Or did that interest come on later?
The whole poetry thing came on much later. Yeah, as I was completing my doctoral dissertation, I mean, I wasn't even thinking about poetry except insofar as, reading the poems that were used as texts, either in Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique or excuse me, Berlioz's Romeo and Juliet Symphony, or in any number of other, classical music works, songs, operas, what have you. I mean, that was the extent that I was concerned about, about poetry at that point in time. But like I said, I finished the doctoral dissertation and eventually started writing about music for the media, and for a much broader audience, not just for an academic audience. And so, in order to make my writing, as lively and as vivid, as I possibly could for the readers, I was sort of just kind of trying to stretch myself as a writer in that sense. And so, like I said, it was really very, very much a short hop from writing about music to writing poems. So that's honestly, that's how it all came about much later.
Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine it's sort of, being taken seriously at that point. But so how did you, what did you do to jump into poetry? Was there something that you were first introduced to or stumbled upon or what?
So actually I feel like I sort of stumbled accidentally into poetry. At the time, I wrote what I would consider to be sort of my first adult poem, you know what I mean? Like not a poem that I had to write for a high school assignment or something like that. I was working and doing a lot of writing about music for the media and so on and so forth. And I also had in my mind an idea for a novel that I still think would be a good idea for a novel. And I hope someday I might have some time to actually write the book. But I was keeping a notebook, with me. And when I would get ideas about a character or a plot twist or something like that, I would write a note in the notebook about that. And I was keeping, like this notebook, I think on my night table and so forth. Around the same time, I was going through a bout of insomnia, which happens from time to time. And I remember I was sort of waking up in the wee hours of the morning, and I have like lines, of text sort of running, running through my head, and I would wake up and it would be annoying. And I would say, okay, I'm gonna try to go back to sleep, right now, but I'll hopefully remember the line and write it down when I get up for real in in a few hours. And of course, I never remembered the lines. So I eventually decided, next time this happens, I am actually going to take that notebook on my night table and write down the line. And it happened again, and I took the notebook and I started writing the line, and actually like I stopped writing, and what I had on the page was sort of long and skinny, like down the page. And it sort of held the poem out at, kind of arm's length, and it looked like a poem. And I read it again and I thought, this looks like a poem, and I'm not sure it's a good poem, but I don't think it's a bad piece of writing, if I can put it that way. And so I actually took that poem to what was at the time here in Columbus, a longstanding poetry reading series, where they had an open mic. They had feature readers and feature poets, and then they had an open mic, and I read it at the open mic. Mm-hmm. And the poem went over well. And actually, it was at that open mic that I met what I consider to be like my poetry guardian angel. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to share this story, because if there are people who are kind of watching this who have just started on their poetry journeys, this is exactly where I was when I went to that open mic and I read my kind of first adult poem. I was sitting listening to the featured reader, who did 2 sets with a break in between. And I had brought my little poem, and this featured poet was spectacular, just spectacular. And I was feeling more and more frightened, about reading my little poem at the open mic. And this reading series was meeting in a bar on like a Monday night. And I was sitting at the bar next to this guy, and the first featured set ended, and there was a 10 or 15 minute break, and the guy kind of looks over and says, kind of, "Hi, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh, fine." He said, "You got a poem there? Are you going to read it at the open mic?" And I said, "Well, I was, but I'm feeling a little bit outclassed." And he said, "Don't judge. Read it. Get up and read it. Mm-hmm. Don't just read it. Don't judge. Just read it." And I read it, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad I did, and I'm so glad that my poetry guardian angel, whom I have never seen since,
oh wow,
happened to be there that night. So hopefully that story. I would love to be like everyone's poetry guardian angel. Don't second guess yourself. Just do it.
Oh yeah, that is great, and so cool that you don't know who that is, and maybe they'll.
I have no idea
who watching here. Do you remember a description of what they look like or anything?
Vaguely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, but I've as much as I've sort of met other poets in the local poetry scene, I've never seen this person again. I mean, so it could have been somebody who just came in on a Monday night, to have a beer at the bar and just happened to run into some poetry and
Mm-hmm.
had some nice words for me. I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe they'll watch the show and get in touch with it.
Yeah, I'd love it. Yeah.
Well, let's do one more sort of traditional poem. I don't know if that's the right word. And maybe let's do Baby Buggy Boogie Woogie, because there's so much music in that one. I think it'd be a fun one to read.
Sure. So this poem is called, as you said, Baby Buggy Boogie Woogie, and I have a little epigraph. Well, it's not really an epigraph, but it's subtitled, if you will, Homage to Pete Mondrian. And Pete Mondrian is the great 20th century artist who painted that painting Broadway Boogie Woogie. So it's the blue and the red and the yellow squares, in the New York City street grid kind of configuration to convey the energy of the New York City streets. And so it's a very famous painting, very, very lively painting. And one day I just thought, okay, wouldn't it be interesting to put, sort of metaphorically speaking, that painting, that famous painting, in a bag with somebody like a stay-at-home mom who lives in the suburbs and is taking, pushing the baby buggy, around for her midday walk or something like that. And just put those two things in the bag: the New York City street grid, the suburban street not quite grid, and sort of see what comes out of it. And what came out of it is this poem. Baby buggy boogie boogie. Not dull cement squares, but red, yellow, blue, bebop beneath the mothersome beat of Nikes. Twist and turn, skinny scat, Under Armour, under upper baby gliding, push, pull, pit bull, pretty girl, whirl around the block, noon o'clock, step by French-tipped tracts in Stepford gridwork. Bumble ride, boogies by, baby boy lobs his toy, shrieks with joy, no time to stop, hop around the corner, then once more before back home, alone, no one to phone, so clean the house again, the din of babyescent babble. Long hours to go to the store once more, want more than this, walk more, walk some more, beat heels on blue, yellow, red, walk more and more, still around the neighborhood, dead still, that never sleeps.
Yeah, that was Jennifer Hambrick with Baby Buggy Boogie Woogie, a really fun poem. Thanks for sharing that. You can see in that poem and the ones we've read so far, the musical influence. We've been talking about music a lot. But then haiku is such a different, to jump from very musical poetry and a music background to haiku, which some people say you shouldn't even rhyme in haiku. That's like one of the admonishments, they argue against. Much as I love haiku, it might be the least musically focused genre of poetry. So how did you get into haiku? That must be a different story altogether, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I got into haiku. Well, I actually, there's an insomnia thread that runs through this story as well. I got into haiku again by accident. I had been writing poetry for a few years or so, and I was going through a bout of insomnia, and I'd get up in the wee hours and I'd go on Facebook because that's what we all do, right? And I started writing what I called insomnia haiku, and they were just sort of these little silly 3-line poems, just I can't even give you an example of one. I don't remember, but just to kind of have something for my brain to do. And some folks responded, on Facebook, yeah, I get it, that kind of thing. And then I don't know what it was, but maybe it was just a question of, okay, well, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, why don't I find out more? I'd like to maybe learn more about haiku and how they really go. And I went online, started tooling around a little bit, and I discovered, of course, that there's this rich tradition, in English language haiku. There's a global community of poets who write haiku and related genres in English, who take it very seriously. There are journals such as Modern Haiku, such as Frog Pond, which is the journal of the Haiku Society of America, and many others that are expressly devoted to haiku and related genres, and to publishing haiku criticism, literary criticism having to do with haiku. And so that's when I kind of realized, wait a minute, I need to take this seriously. This is a serious literary genre that has actually a quite fascinating history. Both the English language part of the haiku tradition, as well as the Japanese language part of the haiku tradition. And so that's kind of how I got into it and how I started taking it seriously. And then the more seriously I took it, the more interesting it became to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is fascinating too, and the musical aspect of haiku is fascinating itself, which is so complicated to even explain because the way that mora work and the way that we're measuring time and the same. But it's interestingly almost more similar to music as far as like looking at a sheet, because you have the actual time. And there are like silences within the measure. See, I'm bad with music. I don't know if I'm using the right words. But there's like a, if it's like a 4 beat or whatever, there's like a length of time for each chunk, right? And in haiku, the original structure in the Japanese of haiku is to have a sort of room for silence within those measures of 7, mora, the 7 own lengths of each line. And so there's this way that it's sort of, in a way, because it has the rest too, ties into music a little bit more closely even than traditional, stress-based musicality of English language poetry traditionally. So can you explain a little bit about that and about the, how does music get into haiku? It is that thing I've heard people say. I like it when a haiku occasionally sneak a rhyme in. It's like really fun to me. And the fact that it's rare, though, kind of, it has to be. You can't like expect it or else it ruins it. It's like it's surprising when it happens. It makes it work. But how do you think about music when it comes to haiku? Is the short question to the long question.
Sure. How do I think about music when it comes to haiku? I to be honest with you, in a very similar way to how I think about music when I'm writing anything else, including when I'm writing the kind of feature journalism that I do, in my professional job. The assonance, the alliteration, the rhythm of the words, in particular. Of course, haiku, you're dealing with many fewer words. Generally speaking, we're not so much concerned with the whole 5-7-5 thing in English. I think a lot of us, myself included, learn to write haiku in that way when we're maybe in elementary school or something like that, by shoehorning syllables, 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, 5 in the third. But we're not really concerned about that. That there are far more important aesthetic ingredients, I'll say, that we can. The sounds of the words, the rhythms of the words, how they feel, in much the same way as I do when I'm writing longer lyric poetry. So for instance, one of my haiku, Frost Field, a quiet walk through the Milky Way. Frost Field in the first line. I mean, there's a little bit of alliteration there. It doesn't have to be any more than that. A quiet walk through the Milky Way. And, the rhythm is just kind of nice. It just kind of flows along. So, your point about the more in Japanese, and it's a very important thing to know about. If you're going to write haiku, and I think it's a really important thing to discuss in this conversation, because my guess is that a lot of people who are like listening to this conversation learned haiku, as I did, as I said just a moment or two ago, being taught to kind of think of a haiku as a 3-line poem with 5 syllables and then 7 and then 5 syllables. So it all became very easy for us when we were children to kind of count syllables. But syllables in English and more in Japanese are not analogous. There are more, each mora in Japanese is the same length. That is not the case for syllables in English. Some syllables in English actually are significantly longer than a Japanese mora. So when it comes to like capturing the fleetingness of a haiku, which I think is an important aspect of a haiku, of the aesthetics of a haiku in Japanese or in English, you can get bogged down maybe just that much more by sort of transferring, kind of English syllables into the sort of metrical framework of a Japanese language haiku, because the English poem just is that much longer, potentially, than the Japanese poem. And when you actually learn Japanese, which I'm doing right now, you are taught, to sort of pay attention to how you are, how many more you are giving certain vowels in particular, consonants too in some instances. Double consonants are given 2 more, double vowels are given 2 more, and a word can one word that has a double consonant can sound very much to our English speaking ears, if you will, like a very similar word in Japanese that has only 1 mora, only 1 consonant. But to the Japanese mindset and the Japanese ear, it's very, very different sound. It's a completely different word. So that's extremely important background to have as you're actually, considering English language haiku.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear some of your haiku. You sent one in sort of a traditional, sort of maybe a warm-up, because the new book, A Silence or Two, is very experimental in the way you push the boundaries of what haiku is, maybe especially for people who are used to the 5-7-5. It's a very big departure in some cases with a lot of monoku in the book. Do you want to read this first one that you sent about the corn one, which is appropriate for today too? We started out the show that way.
Sure, sure. I will, and by way of sort of maybe talking a little bit about traditional haiku style versus avant-garde haiku style. So this poem is in more of a sort of a traditional haiku vein, I would say. Corn tassels, the first whispers between us. I'll read it again. Corn tassels, the first whispers between us. And you know, just a note about the music. Corn tassels, the first. There are a lot of sibilants. Corn tassels, the first whispers between us, and of course the whispers. All of those sibilants play into the whole idea of whispering and so on and so forth. Um, the the this poem is I would say, you know, pretty much in a traditional vein, because there's a seasonal reference for one thing with the corn tassels. Corn tassels appear at a certain season within the life cycle of the corn. Um, and that first line with the corn tassels is the first part of the haiku. It is in and of itself a part of the haiku, one whole part, if you will, of the haiku. Then the second of the two parts of the haiku are the second and third lines, the first whispers between us. And between the two, between the end of the first line and the beginning of the second line, there is a cut, or in Japanese, kire, which separates the two poems from, or excuse me, the two parts of the poems from each other. And so then the mind is left to kind of fill in the blank there, created by the cut. What does the first whispers between us have to do with corn tassels? And then you can kind of fill in the blanks, you know, with your own narrative or what have you. This is a very traditional haiku, because it's three lines. It's got a cut. It's got a seasonal reference, in particular, and you know, it tells, you know, a kind of little story. It tells a little story in that sense. The poems in A Silence or Two, which just came out from Red Moon Press, and I'd just like to thank Jim Cation with Red Moon Press for publishing my book. As you mentioned, they're a little bit they push the envelope a little bit. They're what I would call avant-garde in style. The engine, I think is probably safe to say, of a haiku is this cut in the middle, so to speak, of the poem. It's this thing that separates the two parts of the poem and gives you this space, or in sort of a Japanese kind of aesthetic framework, in which it's empty. The space is empty, but it's really full of possibility. And the possibility is, you know, how do I make sense of this poem? The possibility comes from you, in a way, you know, how you fill that space. And so the poems in A Silence or Two, all are, you know, have this very traditional, I'll say, ingredient of kire, but I use kire in such a way as to not just cut between one image and another, between, say, corn tassels and the first whispers between us, which are two images in this world, but to cut actually between different levels or layers of consciousness, and even to cut between this world and the world of imagination. So that's how I am using cut in these haiku in A Silence or Two.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, do you want to show some examples? And the one thing about the traditions in the haiku world are that pages aren't numbered, so it's hard for me to find specific ones. But
Sure.
Do you want to maybe start at the beginning and read a few, and we can talk, you know, stop whenever you'd like and talk about them? Was that a good way to do it?
Sure. The first poem in the collection is Blood Dusk, the sign language of memory. Blood Dusk, the sign language of memory. So already in the first line, Blood Dusk, there's a musicality there with the assonance of blood and dusk, the identical vowels in those two words. But there are also those you know, hard, heavy initial consonants, blood, dusk, and then the K at the end. It's a very sort of heavy sounding line. But what is a blood dusk? You know, what even is blood dusk? It's not the same as a corn tassel. I mean, we're not in Kansas anymore, right? Quite literally, right? than the sign language of memory. So I wrote the poem. I can't tell you what the sign language of memory really actually literally is, but I feel like I know intuitively what it is and
Mm-hmm.
how it relates to blood dusk
Mm-hmm.
through the cut after dusk and before the sign language, the cut at the end of line one and before line two. So all of these poems work in that way. There's a lot of intuitive leaps that I'm sort of working on and asking the readers to kind of
Mm-hmm.
make as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, those leap, it really stretches your imagination as far as your imagination will take you. It's sort of the goal, it seems to me. And for this blood dusk, I'm imagining, to me, the blood dusk is a really deep red sunset. Like that kind of dusk. Where it's really, there's the blood moon there too. That kind of like coming up maybe, and then the way that feeds through nostalgia and those sort of memories that you can't quite place, to me, that's where this one takes me. But the fascinating thing about this is when you're stretching your imagination like that, like there's so much on the reader to add to it. It's like me thinking about, to me, it's like it makes it feel like 7 years old again or something for some reason I can't quite place, and I think that's the magic of a good haiku, is that there's that place for the reader to be there too.
Well, and one point I'd like to make about the sort of traditional haiku versus the avant-garde haiku, is that traditional haiku tend to be kind of based in or rooted in, if I can put it that way, what often is called objective realism, and there's a lot of disagreement about, like, is there even such a thing, as objective realism? But imagery drawn from this world, imagery drawn from our own sensory experiences of being in a cornfield in late summer or early fall, or being out taking a walk in the snow in the middle of winter or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these the avant-garde haiku tradition, both in Japanese haiku and then also in English language haiku, kind of steps away from that. Not necessarily entirely, but there's a different sort of approach to, well, why should we be limited, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
to imagery that is just drawn from literally what we see around us, literally the things and seasons and so on, is that we see around us. Why can't we use our imaginations? And so that's again what most of the poems in A Silence or Two, how they behave,
Mm-hmm.
how those poems behave.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's hear another one. Let's skip the longer poems. There are a few, longer we say is, and it's like 6 lines, so they're so short poems. But let's skip to the next haiku, Quiet Evening. Do you want to read that? Or maybe a few in the book?
Sure. Let's see. The second haiku right. This is a collection of mostly haiku, but also some very short
Mm-hmm.
prose poems. So this is the second haiku, as you said, and it's a one-line haiku. Quiet evening, a candle flame in the imperative. Quiet evening, a candle flame in the imperative. And so, this is a one-line haiku, and actually I will say that, haiku in Japanese tend to be written in one line, just written in one line, like usually vertically. And so in the English language tradition, it's very, very common to see not only 3-line haiku in English, but also single-line haiku. So this is just happens to be a one-liner. There's a cut after quiet evening. Quiet evening is its own thing, and that can be, that's an image drawn from this world. We've all experienced quiet evenings. A candle flame in the imperative. We've experienced candle flames, but what is a candle flame in the imperative? That's where we've actually stepped out of the physical world that we are in,
Mm-hmm.
and more into the world of imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Or intuition, an intuitive leap.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's read a few more.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of skip around a little bit. In too deep to turn back starlight. in too deep to turn back starlight. Starflower, this longing to become an ocean. Starflower, this longing to become an ocean. This is another one-liner here. Let's be honest, clouds at eye level. Let's be honest, clouds at eye level. Chrysalis, what he sees in me. Chrysalis, what he sees in me. Deep in your eye am so yes. Deep in your eye am so yes. Summer rain, I drink the night of you. Summer rain, I drink the night of you. Bone moon, the wandering stillness of his winter. Bone moon, the wandering stillness of his winter. Calla lily, the contours of his absence. Calla lily, the contours of his absence. Ancient rain, when we used to be a sky. Ancient rain, when we used to be a sky. This next poem is the title poem of the collection. Broken stars, deep in the sonogram, a silence or two. Broken stars, deep in the sonogram, a silence or two. Bitter cold, that part of me howling at the moon. Bitter cold, that part of me howling at the moon. This is a one-line poem. The scars in our sky, scalpel moon. The scars in our sky, scalpel moon. Whale fall, my ocean's quiet, deaths. Whale fall, my ocean's quiet, deaths. Deep midnight, dark stars drowning in my wake. Deep midnight, dark stars drowning in my wake. And I'll read just one more. Sinking into my seabed, that one mean bone. Sinking into my seabed, that one mean bone.
And those were Haiku by Jennifer Hambrick from A Silence or Two, her newest book from Red Moon Press, which of course you can find at Red Moon Press's website and Jennifer Hambrick's website as well. So Jennifer, you can see really interestingly, even in that section that you read, you feel like a theme's emerging from the poems too. How does a haiku collection come together? Were you targetedly writing about anything, or did you have like 1,000 haiku and you found all the ones that fit? What's the process like for putting a haiku book together? Because it seems like, I know a lot of people, we had like Josh Eric Williams on, and he was talking about writing haiku every single day. And so there's just this mountains and mountains of haiku. What's the process like for coming up with a haiku book?
So I recently I was asked I was asked to give a presentation on precisely this subject, on precisely this topic, for the Haiku Society of America's Young Poets group. And I made the presentation. We got really deep into the weeds, discussing various topics, and I think it was during the Q&A that one of the members of the group asked kind of asked me directly, a question very similar to the one that you just asked, which was, when you were writing these haiku, were you writing them as a book? No, no, I was not. And in fact, I was writing these poems um, because I started writing in this particular vein, this avant-garde haiku vein, because I had been writing more or less traditional haiku for a few years. And then I decided, there is this, I saw that there was this other end, this avant-garde end of the style spectrum, the haiku style spectrum. And I had kind of tried my hand at it, but then I thought, no, there's something more going on here. And I really want to educate myself. So I took a deep dive. I read a bunch of criticism on the English language avant-garde haiku tradition, and one of the most important voices of among literary critics writing about avant-garde haiku is my friend and sometimes collaborator Richard Gilbert. He's done all of this tremendous path-breaking work on avant-garde haiku as a literary critic. And so I really took a deep dive and read all of this criticism and read all of these really interesting poems in this vein, any of them that I could get my hands on. And as I was putting myself through those paces, I was writing all of these poems, really trying my hand at it, and sent a lot of these poems actually to Richard Gilbert, who founded the Heliosparrow Poetry Journal, which is an online journal devoted to avant-garde haiku, and haibun and related genres, avant-garde poetry, short poetry, and he and his co-editor Clayton Beach, who's also written some really important criticism on avant-garde haiku, just kind of kept taking more and more of my poems, and eventually, Richard just kept writing me saying, do you realize the sort of storytelling dimension of these poems? And I said, no, there isn't one. No, I'm just writing these poems individually. He kept coming back to me, but you realize, the narrative dimension. No, there really isn't one. And then finally, I decided, okay, he keeps saying this. Let me sort of back away and sort of, try to look objectively at these poems as though I hadn't written them, and maybe from his perspective as somebody who is seeing this kind of group of poems coming in periodically, and then and see if I can actually see the story that I'm telling. And it was only when I did that I realized, okay. Now I see it. I see the types of imagery that kind of repeat throughout, over the course of this group of poems. And I see the types of themes that are actually connecting with those images, kind of emerging on the surface. And so that was when I realized exactly what story I was telling and hadn't realized that I was telling before, and it made perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
so I really can't tell you how. Well, and at that point, then I was able to kind of sequence the poems into the collection, into the narrative that fills out.
Yeah, well, definitely, it's a wonderful book. It really does move, and there's an arc through it too, even though it's not like a story arc. It's this like meta story arc. It's a really interesting way the book operates. Really fun to read all the way through. And Richard Gilbert, he mentioned, of course, was a guest on Rattlecast number 6. We've had a whole bunch of haiku poets. We had Roberta Beery on, Michael Dillon Welch, Jebra Kalaji, a whole bunch of wonderful haiku poets. Kashyana Singh, who was here in the audience. So if anybody wants to learn more about haiku, look back at those episodes too. I should say at this point, if anybody has any questions for Jennifer, we have a little bit of time left, a very short amount of time, but if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube. And also, if you haven't yet, please click the like button, because we always have like twice as many people watching live as click like, and if I say that, it'll go up to closer to 1-to-1 ratio, and that helps the algorithms a lot. So please do click the like button if you haven't yet. Jennifer, you included two Haibun. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. So, because the first poem we published was a haibun with Richard Gilbert in our collaboration issue, and it's a wonderful haibun. And we have a haibun issue coming up as well. So the October 15th is the deadline for our tribute to haibun. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But how do you approach a haibun in a way that's different from a haiku? I mean, what's the relationship like for you?
So haibun, is a hybrid genre that joins traditionally haiku and prose, and sometimes referred to as haiku prose. Um, I I I've written some straight up, haibun that join haiku and actual prose. I tend also to like to approach particularly the prose section in a little bit more of a poetic way, even formally. And one of the haibun, I have for this conversation kind of does that. Um, my thinking is that, there's there's often in the criticism in the literature about haibun, the English language literary criticism about haibun, there's often an introductory paragraph or so that starts talking about the haibun that Basho wrote effectively in his travel journals, particularly his Oku no Hozomichi, or Narrow Road to the Deep North. And of course, Basho was the 17th century Japanese haiku poet, of great repute, and how, from his travel journals, this genre of blending haiku and prose that today is known as haibun kind of emerged. Fast forward or skip over kind of 3 centuries, and here we are in the late 20th century, early 21st century, and we're still doing the same thing. There are a lot of reasons, I think, why there is this kind of 2 or 3 century gap in how we tend to regard haibun. Um, and a lot of that has to do, I think, and I'm in the process actually of researching this right now, so I'm not drawing firm conclusions here, has to do with how the Japanese poets kind of moved away from haiku and joining haiku with prose, and how their prose tradition became kind of its own thing, to put it in a very, very small nutshell. So what we're doing when we're writing haibun in English, and really holding fast to this idea that a haibun is haiku and prose, nothing else, not haiku and some other type of poetry, is maybe skipping over a few centuries that the Japanese tradition doesn't have, but that our tradition in the poetry world actually does have. And so that's sort of why I rely a lot on my background as a lyric poet when I'm kind of coming up with the prose sections for haibun. I don't always, like I said, but sometimes I do, and that's why.
Yeah. Well, let's hear one. You want to read That Summer?
Sure. And this again sort of ties in with the sort of musical theme that we've been working our way through this section with. That summer, everything was wheelie-o, bling-bloop, water in the frying pan, skittery-doo. Everything purple and pink, crackly crunch, salty sweet, lemon lime. Everything high-heeled, lip-glossed, hair-moosed, thonged, pixie cut. Everything schools out, girlish pout, without a doubt, push and shout. Everything untied, wide-eyed, jute-chinned, hemmed-in, take-and-bake, glass-bead, knock-kneed. Everything tilt-a-whirl, carousel, gyro tower, brown cow, show them how, nope, no going back now. Walking around in a new place. First kiss.
Yeah, that's a wonderful haibun, and I wanted to go through some of these because as people are submitting for that issue that's coming up, you can see how much you can play with it. There's so much possibility for play and difference. It's not just prose that's sitting flat in the page telling, what you did on your summer vacation, and then you add a haiku. It's that's a part for the playfulness too. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And so that's one of the ones that takes that sort of musical rhythm from some of the other poems we already heard, that boogie woogie, and adds into a haibun. And so, well, let's see. I was going to see if there were any other questions first before we read the last poem, even though we're up on time. One of the things... there it was. So Sharon Ferrante, and this goes away from the haibun for a second. Sharon Ferrante wanted to know about these one-line, the monoku. She says, do you write your one-line poems where they can be read different ways, 2 or 3 different ways? And is that sort of one of the goals, maybe, of that sort of style of writing?
The answer to the first question, yes. Yes, I do. Try to. One of the beautiful things about the one-line form actually is that possibility. And one of the poems in my collection that I think demonstrates that what Sharon's getting to is it goes autumn planting, children in the past tense. Autumn planting, children in the past tense. So autumn planting, cut, children, but you can also read it as autumn planting children, which is weird, and very unexpected. And that's okay in avant-garde haiku. Autumn planting children in the past tense, but then it could be also autumn planting children in the past tense, autumn planting children in the past tense. So there are all of these potential places where the cut happens, and that's the power of kire right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful question. And yeah, it is so great to see it when that happens. Also, just autumn planting children in the past tense. There's another ones you didn't mention, but that's a really fascinating one too, what it would mean to be planting children in the past tense.
Right.
Yeah, really, really fascinating stuff, Jennifer. Okay, so we're up out of time. Let's do one last haibun. And this is another one where you have a playfulness to it. There's a visual element to this one.
Yeah, there's a visual element to this one. This is called kintsugi, and kintsugi is the sort of traditional Japanese, I'll say art form, or practice, traditional Japanese practice of taking something like a piece of pottery that has been broken into pieces and repairing it with like a gold, like paste that has gold powder in it. And what that does is it doesn't hide the cracks, it beautifies them. And like in our culture in the West, we would tend to try to glue the pieces together in such a way that you can't see the breaks, right? But they in the Japanese tradition will beautify those broken scenes. And so the poem is in a kind of a block, if you will, of text, but there are spaces between the lines that indicate sort of fractures, if you will. So this is kintsugi. In the space between the spiral staircase and the fireplace soot, between the open gate and the dusty photo album, between night's crisp coverlet and the haze of dawn, between the bell's bronze flare and the wide hips of its hum, in the space between love's orchard blooms and luscious, lingering curves, between the whisper of his fingers and the crackle in my flesh, the touch and the kiss and the giving and the taking, the shadows of our secret ocean and the briny taste of day, in the space between our steps faltering in lantern light and our scars beneath the field stones, beneath the soaring song of meadowlarks and the chalky bones of last year's wishes, between the long days lived and the short ones left to live, between the vanity of having and the wisdom of losing, in the space between the veil's loose threads and the patina of this world. Broken vessel, every breath full of sunlight.
Yeah, it was a wonderful haibun. There was a kintsugi by Jennifer Hambrick. And, you can see all the things we've been talking about in the haiku itself, the different ways to read that big cut where, it's multiple worlds and you're making that leap in between. And the playfulness of the section above, too. So it's a great example of what haibun can do. Yeah, well, thanks so much for being a guest today and sharing this wonderful book. A Silence or Two is the book we've been reading some from, and other poems as well by Jennifer Hambrick. Really fascinating talking to you, Jennifer. A lot of fun stuff to talk about. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
Yep, take care.
You too.
Yeah, that was Jennifer Hambrick once again. You can find all of her work in the varied ways that she does a whole lot of things at jenniferhambrick.com, spelled just like it sounds, jenniferhambrick.com. So find a silence or two there along with her other work. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to, where'd it go? There it is, write a journalistic poem that, no wait, that's not right. I pulled up the wrong one. Prompt line slide. Hang on one second. Let me fix this. Yeah, I put Hambrick or Hammonds instead of Hambrick. Here we go. This is the prompt for this week. There we go. Write a poem that directly references your favorite theatrical play. That was the prompt for this week. Write a poem that directly references your favorite theatrical play. Now, if you'd like to share a poem, and only if you do, join the Zoom link and share the poem. But first, email your poem to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com. All one word, promptlines@rattle.com. Then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy on YouTube and Facebook. Here you go on YouTube and deploying on Facebook as well. I'll pin those to the top if you come in a little later. Jump onto the Zoom if you have one of those poems to share or anything from the previous weeks of prompts as well. Also, keep in mind, it is a one-page max. We're taking that seriously. We got to get through everybody. It's long shows. They've been getting longer and longer. So definitely do a one-page max. Email your poem to promptlines@rattle.com. Then find that Zoom link. But if you want to just sit back and enjoy more poetry, stay watching right where you are. That's the best place to view it, either YouTube or Facebook, so you can see the poems as people read them. And we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. We've got our prompt poems editor, Katie Dozier, here. And yeah, the mic is a little hot. I don't know. Why would that change? I didn't touch anything, but here we are.
I don't know, but
well,
I
anyway.
enjoyed the interview very much. I'm a big fan of Jennifer's poetry, and it was great to talk about two of my favorite forms tonight. It was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. We know you love haibun and haiku, and
I love kintsugi too, so it's a great poem she ended on also.
You definitely, yeah, a lot of fun stuff, and we had that episode just last week of experimental haibun that dropped on the Poetry Space. So really fun to see two examples there by Jennifer.
Yeah.
There's just so much you can do with the form. It almost like writes itself in a way. I mean, just the way that it has a structure that has a leap.
Right.
Like almost if you do it, where there's different sections and they have a leap there, it's almost like automatically interesting, and that leaves so much room to play and have fun things happen.
It's like the 80-20 principle. If you can do that with the leaps, you've got at least 80% of a good poem, hopefully. I say that before I'm about to read mine. And I have to say, so this is the first time I've written mine like an hour before the show. I think like ever.
Yeah, we got all the kids in one house.
Which is great. But it's a lot of kids.
There are a lot of kids. So it's been tough to find some time.
Yeah.
I wrote mine at the very last minute too, as you'll see. But okay. So write a poem that directly references your favorite theatrical play.
Okay.
And I don't know what yours is.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't want to tell you before.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll come as a shock. Totally. But okay.
Probably not.
So I wrote an experimental Haibun.
Oh my gosh, there you go.
Shock of all shocks. So, overture. Auditioning. Back then, how easily we grew a forest of papier-mâché trees. No time to mill about or curse the emptiness of a blank stage, the fog machine moment before we learned the weight of dreams. The stars between. No one would have guessed there was chicken wire hiding under the spray-painted bark of old newspapers. Puck flew around, plunging the stems of plastic flowers into the trees. Daffodils and sunflowers grew together in the seams, the lines. Auditioning, the stars between the lines.
Yeah, and so that is a braided haibun, which we talked about. Kat Laban had some she was talking about as well. And the idea of that is that you divide up the prose, or we'll call it prose for short, but this is some lineated lyric poetry. Yes. But you divide that up between the sections of the haiku to sort of slow down and have them relate in a different way.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is A Midsummer Night's Dream. And this took me back to 9th grade when the seniors staged like a coup. So freshmen, we got the leads. And shout out to my mom who helped me make those trees.
Wow.
So,
very nice.
Yeah.
That was Overture by Katie Joyride. Wonderful haiku embedded in there, especially. Yeah, the stars between the lines.
Thank
there
you.
you go.
All right, now it's time to find out your favorite play.
Okay, well, my favorite play, I would go, because I asked you if it was, if it could be a musical. I wasn't sure if the theatrical play included that. And if so, my favorite is Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I love Hedwig and the Angry Inch. It's so great. Yeah, just every level of like artistry is like on display in that. It's so creative. And so I love that, but I'm working on a series that's I'm trying to do a different person as a different character.
Okay.
And so it's not what my favorite play is. It's what the speaker in these
I'll have to take that into consideration in my judging.
Exactly. So we went with this poem right here. This is Theater of the Absurd. All right. You would think there'd be more things left without so many people left to take them, but people are also the ones taking care. On our walks, we watched a house disintegrate day by day. A spring storm blew off the first worn shingles. Rain in the eaves warped the joists, and soon the whole roof was sagging, guiding water to the inner walls that were a sponge. The front door clung to a hinge full of rusty nails and gave way some night with a crash no one heard. Then the whole earth moved in, with all its animals and insects eating away. All that remained was a kind of raft, deflated on the shore of an island in the grass. We found a coat rack once and a mound of trash, wrapped so tight in a tarp it didn't rot. Rebecca stood it up like a statue in the center of the empty square. Now we're waiting for Godot, she said, sitting down at the base of the prop of a tree. I always knew we'd be the ones to find him.
Oh.
So there is
how interesting.
Theater of the Absurd.
We both had fake trees on the
we
brain
both
for
did.
some reason.
I noticed that, yeah. Well, maybe there's so many trees around here. Anyway, that was the poem for this week. And now let's see what everybody else has. Let's go first to Audrey Friedman, who jumped in quick. Hey, Audrey.
Hi.
Hey, Audrey. Great to see you, too.
We've been away for the summer, and we're not going to be home till October, so I pop in when I can.
Excellent. Where have you been? Last time it was like Fiji or somewhere like that, right?
Yeah, no, that was in my dreams.
Oh, okay.
It was real enough for Tim.
It was, okay.
We're with my family in Massachusetts.
Excellent.
So,
okay.
Hopefully escaping that forming tropical storm supposed to wreak havoc where I live. Okay, so I have to tell you I lied a bit. It's not my favorite play, but it is a play.
Okay.
Deliverance, adaptation at 59 East 59th. I saute the onions, brown the beef, then stare into the pot. I am a pot, a poet, all the same, a vessel not filled, a vessel not empty. I smell the bouquet of the rosemary and her sister herbs. I have no sister, only my dead friend who can't flavor my stew with a pinch of her backwoods narratives, the dialect of her Maine ghosts, or rust flaking from jalopies that pock the driveways throughout all of Lewiston's 36 square miles. She laughingly used to say that her home was like a scene from Deliverance. My Brooklyn backdrop, contrapuntal to hers, of leaning porches with steps leading down to thick muck. Will the rising steam in my kitchen fog what sliced me, then left me to bleed?
Oh, excellent lines throughout that.
Yeah.
Deliverance, adaptation, 59E59. Really cool poem. Thanks for sharing that, Audrey.
Yeah, that was actually from a few prompts that were playing together in my head. Writing a poem with turns was a part of that. And I just got a book that I'd like to recommend, a craft book on poetry. Yesterday, I believe, Dorianne Lux, her book, Finger Exercises for Poets.
Oh.
Lots of very brief, easily read critical essays and exercises to go along with.
Wow. Well, that sounds great. And the last book you recommended was the Kraft Haibun book that everyone loves. So I take your recommendations very seriously, especially. Yeah.
That does sound, is that a new book, Audrey? I hadn't heard about that.
It just came out yesterday.
I'm excited.
Oh, wow.
That sounds wonderful. I love Dorian Lux.
It is. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Audrey.
Good to be here.
Yeah, take care. It was Audrey Friedman with Deliverance Adaptation 59E59. All right, and next let's go to Joanna Woods.
Hello, hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Joanna, great to see you.
Guys, I've missed you. I've been
I know,
playing
it's
in
been
the
a bit.
background, catching up, but I so appreciate that I get my poems every day and I can come listen if I can't catch it live. So
Yeah, well, we
That's
love
the
it when
good
you're
part.
here for sure. Yeah, for sure. Glad you could make it. So what do you have for us? And I'm curious, I love hearing what people's favorite plays are.
Yeah.
So I can't tell if I cheated or not either because I went with the favorite play that I was in as a kid.
That's great.
And then like also the other problem is like sometimes I think my favorite plays are ones I've never seen on stage. I've only read. So then it's like, does that count? So I went with my favorite play that I was in as a kid.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
And I thought I had it pulled up, so give me 2 seconds. Sorry. Okay, now I really have it pulled up. Okay. Bluegrass Theater Guild, circa 2005. My 3 parts: submerged alto, in swelling chorus, learn my choreography, memorize the verse, wait and watch, stage-like grandeur, buffoon with a blunderbuss, pursuing the evasive periwomanhood, unseen but felt oddity, plenty of comparison, being one of the garish swilly girls with painted cleavage. Let the small and ravenous wolves scare our father. It is already clear age is a burden. Please recognize me in my spandex onesie, tail pinned on fiercest crawl. Stage gods, make me look happy as a gilded hat stand.
That is great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
And it was
such
Beauty and the
fun lines
Beast.
there.
I was a bunch of extras in Beauty and the Beast. I was
Oh.
a silly girl in the open. So if you know, you know. But anyway, that was silliness. So
Is the-
thank
are
you
this-
guys so much. I'll switch them. Oh.
Yeah, Joanna, I have to ask: are the Silly Girls the like trio of girls that like swoon over guests? I did that role too. Yes, I did that too. That's hilarious. I loved it. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
The highlight of my career. There it is. There's nothing to do with it.
That was great. So much fun. Thanks so much, Joanna.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll switch to YouTube. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Joanna Woods with Bluegrass Theater Guild, circa 2005.
Oh man, this is fun. The memories are swarming back to me now.
All right, let's go to Bizbashit Mishra next, who was on a little bit earlier than normal. Hey, Biz.
Hey, Katie and Tim.
Hey.
Good evening. How are you
Yeah,
doing?
great to see you. Yeah,
Good.
great. We're great.
You're in both in Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Is it hot?
It is very
It
hot.
is hot. This is accurate. Doing a lot of indoor activities with the kids.
Yeah, even last night outdoors at the
At
concert,
like 11 p.m. it was hot.
it was hot then too.
Until we got in the middle of the thunderstorm, then it wasn't as hot.
Yeah.
Then you have to pick which one you want.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I haven't watched a lot of. I don't have a lot of favorite plays. I watch more movies, but then theaters. And I came from a different time, so. But I did watch the one I wrote about, and and this isn't to 1.5 pages. I'll just read one page and leave it.
Okay.
It's
Okay,
okay. It won't affect much the poem.
Okay.
It's called The Shrew. I don't remember much of it. It's all in snippets. The prince, or someone, a green one, I think, my bad memory, wrote in, there was no horse to see. But how else a prince would have come? Must have been a prince to own a stallion and tame. And the shrew, I didn't even know what that meant. And when I did, why taming? No, that's a different subject. I'm straying again. And there was this guy holding a book and reading, must be the role, until midway, the director, who was the lead actor, who came with his high-powered glasses. Now I know he was the prince wearing a green dress, announced that the actor for that role had an accident, so someone else was filling in, reading borrowed lines. And it was fun to watch my second English play almost back to back. And this was in an amphitheater, and one of my favorite movie directors was sitting with his wife, must be his wife. They went together and kissed someone in the audience at the intermission. And I saw them driving across to a hotel, must be for a dinner at the famous restaurant, must be why else. So the play must have been good, and I felt fulfilled. I doubt if I had read Shakespeare then. At least not a full play. Oh, I read the full. Sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't
The lines are
realize
short. It really wasn't
mean
that
to-
long.
I didn't mean to cheat. I just went. I didn't.
Uh-oh, Zachary Honeycutt's watching for tips.
No, that was great. Really fun. I love that. I love the ending, especially. So I'm glad you read
Yeah.
it. It wasn't too long, but I love that the must be's. All that in that poem there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you captured the way a mind can wander if a play is not the best acted. I do agree with you there.
Yeah. Very true.
It did happen because this guy was reading and I didn't know. I said, "Is that the role?" I mean, I had never read the book. What is he doing? And it's very difficult. And later on, I appreciated him more because how do you emote? If you're reading and you're responding, then you don't know your lines. Somebody's angry, then you're saying. So he was doing not bad considering that. Then this guy said, we're out of town. They were visiting Mumbai, and they said, this guy had an accident, the actor. So somebody's feeling it.
Well, you remember the understudy.
For
That's
sure,
something to
yeah.
be said for that.
And he got a great poem about it.
Yeah.
So thank you
Well,
guys.
thanks so much,
Good
Biz.
night,
Yep.
Katie.
Yep.
Bye.
Take care. Yeah, it was Bijit Mishra with The Shrew.
That's funny. I just get the sense we're all like sitting in a theater together. Now.
Well, that'd be nice. We got to see more plays.
Well, yeah, we've seen more plays together than movies. Fun fact.
That is
We've
true.
seen one movie together in like
That's
6
true,
plays or
yeah.
something.
All right. So Christiana Doucette is next.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Christiana, how you doing?
Doing all right.
Good.
So I went with a play that means a lot to me.
Mhm.
I first read it in college for a college class. And I remember we read it, for our homework, and then we sat down and we watched it. And I had a shift at the library right afterwards, and I ended the shift, or like the class, in tears. I cried my way across campus to the library. I cried my way all the way through my shift, scanning at the library. Then finally was able to stop crying because it just hit me so strongly. And the play is Our Town.
Well, that's good. That's a play I've never seen, and now I really want to see it after that.
So then after I graduated, about 2 years after I graduated, I was still working at the university library, and they were putting on Our Town. And I missed the tryouts because I did, Tim, I think the first time I read, you asked if I did slam poetry, and I've never done slam poetry, but I have done stage acting stuff. So I missed the auditions and everything, but I emailed the director and was like, do you mind if can I like try out for you anyway? Because I really love this play. And I'd heard he already had his actors chosen and everything. And he was like, sure, you come to the callbacks and we'll just, work you in there. So I came and I did my little monologue. I think it was from the Crucible. And then I got Emily. So I played Emily in Our Town. And so it has double meaning there for me in both places. So where I brought this from was from close to the end. So Tim, if you're going to go watch it, I don't know. Don't want to spoil it too much for you.
Well, I have a bad memory for that kind of thing.
Too much more there. I'll just give you the one line.
We'll just let it flow over. Yep. It'll be beautiful. Exactly. I'll take it in fully, and you'll be like a little zoned in. It'll be good. Okay.
So the name of this is Like You Really Saw Me. Oh, Mama, just look at me 1 minute as though you really saw me. Emily Webb, Our Town. To see the soul across from us, the soul beside us striving in its everyday way for its everyday things, missing how every day wings away on fated springs, the joy a moment brings, or the rage, or the fear, or the hope. We grope blindly forward, but moments are mere grasshoppers leaping freely at the slope of long lawn drawn down a lifeline. I try to hold mine, but to attempt is not to attain. Blades of grass cut clenched fists. My erstwhile moment lands 2 stories away, hidden between stems of thought I'll graze but never hold. But bold, I claim I'd catch them, cup them up to me, feel the straining legs skittering against the wrist, the unsprung leap to conclusions about who I am in this. About what I've seen, about what does it mean. Moments' mandibles must gorge or die, the moments bite. We cannot hold that close. The eye too sharp is an open blade, and we, the grass, bent in a wistful wind that whips us to and fro. The moments mow us down, devour us whole. We are not made to see the heart, the soul. Hold a moment fast, we'll weep. But let them leap into the field of dreams, of what it seemed then, what it means to us now, what it may be soon, and let the memories chirp silhouettes of yesterday by the reflected light of the rising meadow tune.
Oh, what beautiful music in that. Wow.
Yeah, really. I love that. The moments mow us down.
Yeah,
what a great line
that's great.
that is. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that, Christiana.
Thanks for letting me share it.
Yeah, that was Christiana Doucette with Like You Really Saw Me after Our Town. Let's go next to Jared Campbell.
Hey, folks.
Hey, Jared. How you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Great. So what do you got for us?
So I did mine about Richard II, which is one of William Shakespeare's history plays.
Yeah, okay. That's one I have trouble with remembering which one's which.
Yeah.
So,
well, not after this poem.
You're gonna have to solidify it in my memory.
He wrote a lot of them, and particularly 8 that were in a sequence, right? In a historical sequence. And of that historical sequence, Richard II is based on not in the order of composition, but chronologically the earliest of them. And so the events of that play kind of kick off everything that goes through the dynastic struggles and the Wars of the Roses and the various wars.
So the original biopics, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, let's hear this one. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, Uncle, for God's sake, speak comfortable words. Should I do so, I should belie my thoughts. Comfort's in heaven, and we are on the earth, where nothing lives but crosses, cares, and grief. And that's from Richard II, Act 2, Scene 2. And my poem is called The Unthinkable. Richard II came ashore and blessed the land beneath his feet, so confident the English flowers would come to him subsistence, tearing the legs of traitors with their thorns, that he compared himself to the rising sun, whose self-evident power uncovers sin and sends the traitor running for his hole. Not all the water in the rough, rude sea can wash the balm off from an anointed king. When I was on paternity leave, and you were 1 month old and wouldn't sleep at night, I'd swaddle you and watch The Hollow Crown, an adaptation of Shakespeare's history plays. Your breathing's rhythm told me when you slept, but you were so light in those dark nights, I held you for the sake of holding you, your face lit only by the ghostly screen where Richard learned, one by one, of his misfortunes, the desertions of his allies, the murders of his friends. It's shocking how quickly unthinkable affairs become not thinkable but real, and once the world is upside down, it's hard to recollect what it was like when it was right side up. How fragile are the fictions that support our human world? In 200 lines of poetry, King Richard was transformed from despot to deposed, his golden age of art and literature now thought of as mere prelude to his cataclysmic fall. He spent the last 2 acts in glorious self-pity, prophesying civil war must follow from the doctrine arms choose kings, a prophecy as petulant as true. King Richard, arbitrary in power, yet articulate defeated, when did you learn how seldom skillful wearers of the crown also have sense enough to mourn the crown? What have I gotten you involved with? I asked no one, looking down at your angelic, ignorant face.
I love the way that the present is woven in there.
Yeah,
into
very
the
much
past,
so.
through the story.
And
Yeah.
the newborn and the me back, middle of the night. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Jared. That was great. There was Jared Campbell with The Unthinkable. Yeah, thanks, Jared. Next, let's go to Nivedita so she can get back to work, I assume. Hey, Nivi, how you doing?
Hey, Tim. Hey, Katie. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
Yeah, great. Great to see you.
Traveling for the past 2 weeks, so I couldn't make it. The timing was way too off for me. I was halfway
that
through
definitely
work
makes
by
sense.
the time we started. So,
Yeah.
So what do you have to share this week?
Shakespeare play, as usual.
Mm-hmm.
This one I saw, I think, probably about 10, 11 years ago now, As You Like It.
Great choice.
I sort of concentrated on the themes of gender and identity because Rosalind, of course, dresses up as a boy in that. So that's what I went with for the poem.
Great. Well, let's hear it.
It's called Masquerading as the Truth. In the forest, with whispering leaves the witnesses, masks fall away, revealing a fluid dance, the fluid dance of the souls. Here is where freedom is found, not in names or gowns, but in the courage to be more than the roles cast by society. It is a fact that in borrowed guise, truth is clearer, for words are spoken from the heart without restraint. The world confines, constrains, imposes, inflicts on us a script. But here, under the canopy of trees, one becomes many, and many become one. And here, finally, shackles shaken off, eyes meet, recognize the essence, not the shell. The essence, strength and tenderness are not hemmed in by the lines drawn by a hand too distant to see. Thank you.
Yeah, really lovely last line. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi.
Thanks, Nivi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
You
Have
too.
a good day. Thank you, Nivi.
Yeah, thanks, Nivi.
It's actually my birthday here today, so.
Nivi, it's
happy
your birthday.
birthday.
Oh, happy
that's great.
birthday. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I hope you have a
Thank
great one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm glad you told us, Nivy. I would have felt sad if I found out after the fact too.
That's true.
Yay! Have a great birthday.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, Nivy. Have a great one. Okay, it's Nivy to Karthik on her birthday with the Masquerading is the Truth. Yeah, that's great. All right, next let's go to Gigi Capone, who's reading for Ted Guevara, which was really nice to see. Hey, Gigi.
Hi, Tim. It's been a while. Nice to see you.
Yeah, great to see you again. So you're Ted's sister, right? If I remember right.
Right, and I'm reading.
So glad. Yeah, so glad to have you here.
I'm reading his poem. It's called "Silently the Senses," and that actually line from the main song from Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, and as everybody knows, Ted includes a photo, so he's got a photo. They're really creative photo from Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The line reads, "Silently the senses abandon their defenses." So that's where the title. I just saw this tonight, so bear with me.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to talk to him about it.
I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah.
Silently the senses. Burden me tender this weight, a ghost who hasn't tasted life fully. There was never a mask to wear or a scar to cover. Clasp that sinking shell and give it back to me afloat. I'm qualified. Notices are everybody's stream. No sudden wake. I am. Your gondolier. Looks only matter if you look back. Trust. Me, I will not make waves. I'm already a crash. Upon those sharp rocks, it's inevitable I'll recede. Those defenses, they're not really against you. It's not a horror show. Fright sits in the audience, rubbing some on you. I'm keeping him at bay. Ride, sweet, frail, sweet, emphatic, seen behind my closest infatuated eyes. Content. Though I'm nowhere near it, I stand balanced to hug your normal.
Oh, I love the hug your normal line.
Yeah.
Yeah, really fun. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Gigi. It's always a pleasure to get to hear you read for Ted.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's Ted Guevara's Silently the Senses. And that was actually the one I was debating, before I thought about it. I thought about just writing a poem with that as my favorite because Jo, Safina downstairs, she used to dress up at like age 3. She would put on Phantom of the Opera and then sing out one part the entire show. And then she would put on it again and then do like a different part. So she'd be like Christine, and then she'd be...
Maybe we'll ask her to do it tonight after the show first.
Maybe. But it would be like, I'd be sitting there reading submissions, and on the couch, and she'd be acting or singing her heart out. But for like, it's like 3 hours each one. So it's like 9 hours by the time she got through all the female parts. So I know that play really well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Okay, and now let's go to, we'll go back to the beginning. Dick Westheimer is up next. Hey, Dick.
Hey, all. I brought props.
Yeah. Oh, look at the corn from Dick's own backyard. Yeah, great to see that. So, do you enjoy it fresh, Dick?
And will you eat it live on air right now?
Debbie does eat it raw if it's just very fresh. But I like mine cooked and drizzled with olive oil and a little bit of salt on it. And but we eat a lot of it this time of year because you have to grow a certain amount and then just got to eat it.
That's the way farming works.
We could sell it. No, the grandkids are here and they love it. So that's great. Well, I actually wrote 2. I'll read one, which is a very short one. The second one actually has my favorite play in it, which is Fences. I think August Wilson is probably a contemporary equivalent to Shakespeare in terms of the beauty and lyricism of his language. But I think given all the people on the call, I'll just do this little 8-line.
Okay, well, thanks. Looking forward to this.
Okay, and just by background, I've been associated with a Shakespeare company that has performed a 39 play canon. Is it a 38 play canon or 39 play canon? And ran it for a little while. So I've seen them all.
Oh, wow.
So this is Wishes for an Always Breaking World. In a world of Lady Macbeths, let me be a Duncan, please. In the kingdom of Antiochus, let me be Prince Pericles. In a land of Petruchios, let me be friend to all the shrews. In the city of the silenced, let me be a muse.
Oh, it's a wonderful little poem. Very Philip Larkin-esque.
Yeah.
I really like that, Dick.
Thanks.
Yeah, different direction, too. That's neat.
Reigning prompt poet of the month, I suppose.
Let's say that.
I'll take that. Until what? When will you let us all know?
Next Sunday, you will be usurped, presumably.
We'll see, but yeah.
I appreciate you. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Dick.
You.
Yeah, bye.
Dick Westheimer with Wishes for an Always Breaking World. Hamid Malik is next.
Hi.
Hi, Hamid. Great to see you.
You too. Okay, this is one we've already covered. Waiting for.
Okay.
I wait for no more cats to feed, all the clothes outgrown, every date crossed out in red, no coffee left to down. Blossoms drop, new leaves unfurl, a caterpillar stops and waits for something he thought he heard, a flapping from another place. I wait for every grandchild to sprout from make-believe and burst into 1,000 smiles and vanish in the breeze. The garden grows a building, becomes a rooftop space, a helipad for butterflies, a gym and 2 cafes. How dull my life of waiting, how senseless all these years, my eyes fixed on the door, should Godot's ghost appear.
Yeah, wonderful at the end there.
Really
and then
beautiful.
I love that slant rhyme, space and cafe.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, very pretty. Thanks for sharing that, Hamid.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Hamid Malik with Waiting For. All right, let's go next to Rod DC.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Tim. Hello, Katie.
Hi.
Hello. Roderick, always great to see you.
This is obviously a night for Beckett. So my poem is the same as yours and the same as the previous one, but it's a different slant on it. It's a gentle little poem. There's something else called Waiting. 2 crows perch on a small tree that has succumbed to the recent heat. The tree, single branch pointing nowhere in particular, reminds me of the tree in Waiting for Godot, where 2 ragged old men wait day after day for someone who never comes. That tree sprouts a few leaves in the second act. I'm not sure this one will rise from the dead. We're always waiting for someone or something. In the short term, these 2 crows are clearly an omen or symbolic in some way. It's a puzzle. I'm waiting for the answer to surprise me. Then the corvids will fly away and get on with their usual crow stuff. After that, maybe I can finish my walk before the other shoe drops. In the long term, I'm waiting for the rising tide to lift all boats. I'm also waiting for my ship to come in, whatever that might be.
That was great. I love the pacing in that, the waiting by Rod DC. Thanks so much for sharing that, Rod.
No problem.
Yeah. That was Roderick DC with Waiting. And next we have Zachary Honeycutt.
Hey, Katie. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Zach. How you doing?
Doing good. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're great. Yeah.
Storming out here in Florida, but I haven't seen any cows fly through into my window or anything like that.
Well,
so
that's
we're
a
all
good sign.
Good at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm glad to hear that.
What part of Florida are you in, Zach?
Gainesville, I think. Sorry, I interrupted.
That's cool. I'm from South Florida. I'm from like an hour above West Palm Beach area, like Stewart. I was born in Stewart, but
You were born
I
in
moved-
Stewart. Sorry. I lived in Port St. Lucie for years. My mom lives there. And so we were close to each other for a long time. Didn't know. That's funny.
It was my hometown for almost 20 years. So
Wow. That's funny. I don't know why I thought Gainesville. I don't
but no, I'm in Gainesville now.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Because you were right. That's
Nailed
why-
it in the end.
All right. Well, hopefully it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's we don't get like we're right in the middle of Florida, so we don't get slammed like on the coast. So by the time it gets to us, we just get like the gales. We don't usually get the brunt of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you got for us this week? Yeah.
So I'm gonna be the one guy that does a poem from last week's prompts. Even though I love all the Shakespeare love, I love the waiting for God it love, and I got ideas tonight from watching all of you guys. Maybe I'll do like a Macbeth sonnet or something like that, a dark, creepy kind of stuff.
That sounds fun. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm gonna just do this. Has a lot of turns, so I thought I would read it. I've been really sick. I'm getting over the flu, so I just
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, no, I'm good. All right, Sonnet 2, Ignorance of Heights. I see this tree with birds that spread their wings. I see some soaring, sailing, and swaying, joyfully thinking of jovial things. To me must be a grand game they're playing, as simple as sand lethargically swept by a crystal clear sea with crashing arms, as unthinking as time ticking unkempt, moving irregardless of looks and charms. Why do they get to frolic all the day? Why are they soaring so often and free, whilst I am grounded so oft in dismay, itching and wishing to fray as they be? Wonder if they take for granted this state. Under a tree, there's just me and the weight.
Yeah, wonderfully done sonnet, as always, Zach.
Yeah.
Excellent use of the form. Thanks for sharing that.
Hope you feel better all the way soon.
Yeah, thank you guys. Enjoy lovely, great poems as always. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Zachary Honeycutt with Ignorance of Heights. And next, let's go to... go back to Stephen Croft.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen. Great to see you.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I reference a job I had during college, a paint factory job. That paint factory is now a Superfund site along with the Tidal Creek that runs behind it. The factory's still there in the town where I work, abandoned. The Jekyll Island Amphitheater, which I reference, closed in the 90s. So it's abandoned, but it's still in the forest on Jekyll Island. And I believe that the ghosts that haunt the amphitheater are happier ghosts than the ones that haunt the paint factory.
Oh, wow. What an interesting setup for that poem. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So this is the summer I escaped to Brigadoon. Sun rises over tidal marsh, filling the factory's grimy dormers with faint light, making a haze of floating chemical additives. As I sweep the floor's pathways clear, decades of residue forever refilling throughways beaten daily by work boots, churned by forklifts. Sun sets behind a barrier island's maritime forest, growing twilight making a haze of shadows on the stage floor of the Jekyll Island Amphitheater, where two men with fishing poles wander the Scottish Highlands, looking for their bearings. The morning of my first day on the paint factory floor jarring, worn pumps spitting solvent rain 10 feet out, pushing thinner from pool-sized vats into the line of tall mixing tanks that men atop pour bags of additives into, pulling down dust masks as heat stifles. Night settling in, the orchestra starts up its cheerful tempo, decibels massaging out night's forest drone song of crickets and frogs. And Tommy says, this forest is like being in a cathedral. Day growing hotter, I say, this paint factory is like being in the inferno. All week during that college summer, I worked like one of the hands in Dickens' Hard Times, slaving my hours in Coketown. But evenings on Saturday nights, I lived in Lerner and Lowe's Brigadoon, going with Tommy and Jeff again and again to a magical, wonderful place. Seeing it once, I never missed it. One Friday, a pump under a huge mixing tank exploded, hosing me down with yellow road paint, which I couldn't quite scrub off. Still, I visited Brigadoon, my face cast with a faint yellow makeup like I was one of the play's extras. Lifting 5-gallon cans of paint 3 high onto pallets all day, walls mercury thermometer topping 100. It's almost like being in hell. The festive village, the light romance, the cheerful songs and dance. It's just as Tommy and Fiona sing. It's almost like being in love.
Yeah, great images in that, Stephen. A wonderful poem. The summer I escaped to Brigadoon. Yeah, and that image of the yellow paint on the face. Very memorable. Yeah,
that stuff is, it stays on the road for a reason. It's really
I
hard.
can imagine. It's like half glue, half paint.
Out of your hair. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. All right. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Take care. Yeah, that was The Summer I Escaped Brigadoon by Stephen Croft. Let's go to Mary Keating next.
Thanks. I didn't think I was going to make it.
Yeah, Mary, well, I'm glad you did.
Over my injury.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a long road. I can sort of lift my hand up, but still have AIDS and it's tough. It's painful.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But here I am.
Well, so glad to have you here. Yeah.
Good to
Happy
see you.
birthday, Katie.
Oh, thanks.
So I did it on Our Town too, which I love. And it's called Embrace It All. And I did it in a villanelle. Do human beings ever realize life while they live it every minute? Saints and poets, maybe. That's from Our Town. Sometimes, when the pain in my body is too great, I imagine I'm sitting on a hill in Grover's Corner, New Hampshire, surveying the world of the living, grateful for the time I could feel. I imagine I'm sitting on a hill in one of the oldest graveyards with the dead, grateful for the time we could feel as we watch how fast everything goes. In graveyards, the story of our lives is condensed between 2 numbers, reminding us how fast everything goes. Happiness as well as pain and suffering. Before my life's commemorated by a few numbers, I must remind myself to embrace it all. Happiness as well as pain and suffering. For one day, I won't be able to taste my tears. I remind myself that I must embrace it all and not just watch the world detach. For one day, I won't be able to shed my tears when the pain is too great for not living.
Oh, what a powerful poem, Mary. Yeah,
really
wonderful use of the pantoum to
Yeah.
get that out with the repetition. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. I'm gonna go back to YouTube now. Bye-bye.
Okay, great.
Bye.
Thanks, Mary. Hope you feel better
Yeah.
soon.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Yeah, that was Embrace It All by Mary Keating. Next, let's go to Nancy Tennell.
I had quite a journey with this prompt, Katie.
Oh, good. I hope.
I wrote my poem about 5 times. I wrote a regular poem. One of my favorite plays is Cyrano de Bergerac because I first read it when I was a teenager, and all that, yearning and emotion and romantic notions, just overwhelmed me. And I still love the play. So my first poem was a very lofty philosophical treatise. And then I wrote a haibun, and it was also lofty. And then I remembered, I just felt like it wasn't gelling. And so then I remembered a poem that mentioned Cyrano that I wrote a year or more ago, sent it to Rattle as a general submission. And it was, that poem at that time was written in response to something that Tim said. And I've only been doing this for about a year or so. And so right at the beginning, Tim made a statement one night that really stuck with me about how sometimes we have to abandon a poem for a while. And so I was at that point. So I retrieved that poem, which is called The Poem I Abandoned, and
That's a great
tweaked
title.
it a little bit to fit this situation this week.
Oh, great.
I chased those words like a mother chases a toddler on the loop. But they refused to align themselves, glared at me defiantly from the page. Perhaps if I had made them more colorful with variegated prismatic harlequin lines, words with the beauty of designer gowns, words with the elegance of Van Cleef and Arpels, they might have consented to fall into place in appreciation of my mental sacrifice for them. Or maybe they just wanted to rhyme and I did not allow them to rhyme. Well, whose poem is this, theirs or mine? I was Christian, unable to woo Roxanne without a Cyrano to speak for me. Someone with a gift for arranging words, as a florist does flowers or a composer his notes. I even made a list, thinking I could trick it, make it become a poem, but the words did not agree. You might say I abandoned the poem, but truth is, the poem abandoned me.
That was
great.
Yeah, that was great.
I just couldn't be lofty, so I ended up just being funny.
That's wonderful. And I love Cyrano de Bergerac, one of my favorites too.
Oh,
and I read it
it's
as
so
a teenager, and I just, and that's a wonderful to insert Cyrano in there. That's great.
Yeah.
That is great. You had so much fun with that, Nancy. You could just tell. And then the
Thanks.
poem is so much fun as a result. Thanks for sharing.
Switching over.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, fine. It was Nancy Tunnell with the poem I Abandoned.
I love the no concession to the rhyme as nodding, allowing it to rhyme with the end stop. It's very funny. I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, let's go next to Tina Dennettclaw.
Thank you.
Hey, Tina. Yeah, so glad to see you.
Hi. You guys are so much fun. I'm the little baby among you, though. I don't know how to write poems, but I show up. So
well, you're doing great. I'm looking forward to this next poem.
I'm learning so much from your whole program, everything you guys do. So I just thank you so much. So this poem, Henry V. So Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson did some wonderful versions of Shakespearean plays. I don't know if that was the 80s or when that was. But at any rate, Henry V is our very favorite. My husband and I will bore people to death quoting lines from there. We enjoy the humor so much. And this was going to be a humorous poem, but even it's not. So now I've written Zachary's very dark and creepy poem here.
Yay.
Oh, and I guess what I'll do is I'll go down and tell you what the lines are. Okay, so this was a merry message. Take a soldier, take a king. Those were from Shakespeare, Henry V, from Branagh and Thompson. But there was a film called The King, 2019, made a couple of Australians working with, I think it was Brad Pitt. Wonderful poem, wonderful film, much different take on the story. And I borrowed from that as well. And it's so easily beguiled. And that's from a different version of Henry V. Okay. So let's see how creepy I can make this sound. Okay, this was a merry message. Tennis balls hit back hard against ambition. Isn't this always how it starts? Ambition struts into a meadow to make or break a dynasty. Take a soldier, take a king, or mount defense in rage, or perhaps begin a lie. Cousin runs your head. Religion has started wars as often, or ideas have done it. Religious ideas have done it. Rivals, old and new, have done it. Or creed. Ambition creeps beneath. What does a tsunami sound like? Bloodless, rising waters. Bodies floating by. Khrushchev said they'd bury us. We had no idea the flood would come up from the subfloor beneath us. We were so easily ignorant.
Yeah, great use of those lines, weaving a poem through almost like a golden shovel-ish type.
Interesting.
Tone. Yeah, really interesting form. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
That was Tina Dennett-Claw with Beguiled. Yeah. All right, and next, let's go. Got a few folks left. Mike Bales is here.
Evening.
Hey, Mike.
Barnes & Noble has some copies of Rattle number 69. It's got Mary Lisa Dominicius in there. You're better pronouncing her name than I am.
Only after 2 years. So
Mary
that's
Lisa
okay.
Dominicius.
Usually I say it right. I didn't say it right then. T.R. Paulson, and there was some really good poem in the last poem in the open section about someone who's both a cutter and had an eating disorder.
So you found that in a Barnes & Noble like just now?
I saw it earlier today.
That's
69 in the data. It's like you're
it's like 4 years old or something. Yeah,
bringing it back. Yeah,
I wonder how that's possible.
Interesting.
Like somebody found a box in the back of the store, or
somebody special ordered it.
Maybe, and then didn't want to buy it.
There are a handful of them.
Shelf. I don't know. Yeah,
it wasn't just one. It's been about 5 of them. So, this goes back to flagging. Go figure. I loved working in Western Iowa because of all the wind turbines, and actually in Northern Iowa. And the reason I liked all those wind turbines is because I saw the play Man of La Mancha. I was driving this. We got along great. I was driving this flagger crazy in Northwest Iowa because anytime I saw a wind turbine, I'd go to him, "Ooh, wind turbine." He'd go, "I like you talking about that again." I don't know. As a guy with women, I kind of figure I'm like a Don Quixote kind of guy. But anyway, the poem, I had to email it to you because the submission thing wasn't open yet. Chivalry.
Great, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
And if you don't have the headings on it, it fits in one page. Chivalry. My work partner ignored the turbines as they sliced the wind. They scattered themselves over a patchwork of hills and fields as we drove to our site down the road. The blades glistened in the early sun, and I could see them dance when I took my place on a gravel shoulder. I could see them dance and like lovers fall into each other's arms, and the wind sang a song. Such gallantry I had never known as I caught glances of the blades. I wanted to slay my dragons as the crew tended to machines and repaved the road. I am a knight, I said, and no one listened, but I tell the barmaid in town. Such madness, well-meaning friends said, working long days out here when I could have been drinking and shooting pool with them. Such an ordinary life, I said. The asphalt smelled sweet, but the turbine blades seduced as I learned to live beyond my time and place. I could have been a store clerk or representative nestled in a cubicle reading scripts at a call center, but I found my destiny in the middle of pastoral land.
Yeah, well, you definitely did, Mike. I always loved the Flagger poems.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh.
And definitely loved that job for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a big influence on me.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, that was Chivalry by Mike Bales. Let's go next.
Nice
to...
title, too, I have to say. I like that title.
There's a cut
Yeah,
in that
there's
title.
a cut in that title. I like that.
Yeah, really good. All right, let's go to Brian O'Sullivan next. Hello. Hey, Brian.
Great night tonight. Loving all the poems. I have one about my favorite Elizabethan non-Shakespearean poem, play. And it's Maybe Mephistopheles.
Yeah, I don't think I've read this one either.
No.
Okay. It's from Dr. Faustus. Oh, I leap up to my God, who pulls me down. Christopher Marlowe, Dr. Faustus. Dr. Class's eyes go wide, below wild brows and under thick glasses. His long, sparse hair flies around as he reads those lines he loves and furiously diagrams them on the board, circling the key consonants. See how it leaps from L to P and then falls down again from P to L like a chart of Faustus' ambitions and failed redemption. Then he strikes out the question mark at the end and goes on. And we feel that the who propelled him up may be the same who pulls him down. Maybe Mephistopheles is only the agent of a divine plan that lures the doctor up to swat him down again. I think that's how Class feels about poetry and language and the imagination, which lead him always to the brink of the transcendent and drop him down again at a distant stop on the Long Island Railroad to teach literature to students who don't care. Years later, Jen and I are on the gallant stools at Blackfriars in Virginia, watching Dr. Faustus from the edge of the stage. When the seven sins come out to play, lust flirts with me, making Jen laugh so hard it was worth the back pain from sitting on that stool. I inch to the edge of my stool in anticipation as the play approaches Class's favorite monologue. The tragic heart of the play to me is Class's student. But when Faustus reads that line, the audience laughs, and I don't get the joke. I can't stop thinking about that. So I email the dramaturge, who replies that from the stage, I couldn't see Mephistopheles sitting in the audience and making a small gesture as if to say, you leap up to your God, I pull you down. And I wonder what Class would have thought. Too simple an answer, exculpating God and Faustus? But when I remember the time he smirked and told the faculty senate that the way to teach students to write is to yell at them, and how he reacted when I used that as a pull quote on the front page of the Delphian, I think he would have been all right with the laughter.
Yeah, great turns in that, Brian.
Yeah.
Very unexpected.
Yeah.
Unexpected shifts. Would have worked for last week too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing
Brian.
that. Yeah, that was maybe Mephistopheles.
Yeah, I'm glad you have to read the title, so let's say that.
Brian O'Sullivan.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. All right, and last but not least, we got Mark Grenier.
Hi, Tim and Katie.
Hey, Mark, great to see you. Yeah.
I've got a terribly long, extensive poem here. It'll take about 2 seconds. I wrote it between the interview that you had tonight and submitting it, so it's bound
Well, that's
to be
perfect.
great.
All right.
Yeah. And since we seem to be mired in the Elizabethan age or 20th century, it also goes back a few years to Euripides and his play Medea. Okay. And the other thing that's interesting, this is a play my wife and I went to when we were in college together, and 50, 60 years ago.
Aw.
It's called, it's a really well done play, but what I remember about it is what's in the poem. Medea, wild hair writhing, screams in the dark.
Oh, very
That's
cool.
nice.
Yeah, a little bit of a Zachary Honeycutt tone. To
Yeah,
that one,
I know. That's true.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful interview today, by the way.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. It was Mark Grenier with a haiku to end the show. Perfect
Yeah.
way to do that.
Yeah.
And let's see. That is going to wrap it up. Let's go to the Sciku. What do you say?
Let's go to it.
All right. And the Sciku for this week was based on this story right here.
I'm just impressed you found time to find the article and do the Sciku with the week we had.
Well, this was one that I just, I looked up right. Actually, I wrote this before the other poem, so that was like the first 5 minutes, and then the next 20 was the other poem. Okay, so this is an interesting story, though. I just went to one of the science aggregator websites, and the first story was actually interesting. So this was a 500 million-year-old spiny slug reveals the origin of mollusks, if you can believe it. So there we go. That is the story here. And basically, it's hard to find fossils of mollusks because they're mostly soft. There's not much shit,
sense, yeah.
And so they're wondering how these shells formed. And about 500 million years ago, they found this really specimen where a very thin layer of spiny little spikes coming out of the back of a mollusk was fossilized. And so they could deduce from that that's like the sort of the common ancestor, and that's basically where mollusk shells come from. It's such a varied, octopus or mollusks. It's such a wide variety of creatures, all the way down to little sea slugs. And so these little shellless slugs were covered in little spines, which is like a proto-armor kind of thing going on there. Anyway, that's basically
it's like the base level armor.
Yeah, so here's the actual fossil. You can see the little spikies.
No.
There you go. That was the guy. So, and it's a new species, never discovered before, so they named it, and that was what it was about, too. And the Sciku, based on this, is the following. Spiny slugs yet to evolve a shell online.
That's great. That's one of your better. That one's really good.
Senru, spiny slugs yet to evolve a shell online. Okay, that is the Sciku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Now, we should mention that we're going to come out next week with the Prompt Poet of the Month. So it was a little bit, one of those when it's like the first, the third, or fourth of the month. It's hard to get the submissions in time.
And most of the time I can, but this month I couldn't. So
a little rough. It was your birthday, and all the kids are here.
Yeah, all the kids are here. Yeah.
So we're gonna do it next week. So you can't actually submit yet because we have to wait until we announce and flush out all of the results.
Yes.
In order to restart the submission fields, because otherwise the fields delete. It gets very confusing.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's just how submittable works, and there's no way around it. So anyway, you can't submit your prompt poems yet, but by next week you'll be able to submit your prompt poems. And next week's prompt is going to be what, Katie Dozier?
Okay. And now I didn't leave a lot of interpretation last week because I wanted theatrical play. I didn't want to read about plays and sports and things because I really wanted to selfishly know everyone's favorite play. Mission accomplished.
Yeah,
but
good job.
This next week we are going to write a hot haiku sequence.
Just in time for summer.
Yes, just in time. But you can interpret hot however you want. I'm not here to judge, except for when I'm picking the winning poem. But other than that, I'm here to enjoy.
Well, I can already sort of hear and taste Sharon Ferrante's spicy sausage.
This is good. I think people are primed for this. I'm super excited to read everyone.
Yep. So yeah, definitely great. Talking about haiku again. Of course, you can watch back this episode talking about haiku and the more avant-garde ones that Jennifer Hambrick has. You can look back to old episodes. Michael Dillon Welch is a great one.
We have a haiku episode.
We have a haiku episode of the Poetry Space, or a few probably.
We probably do. I mean, honestly, we talk about haiku a lot. If you notice that as a theme.
Definitely. Haiku is great.
I know.
Haibun
We love it.
too.
Yep.
Yep. So that's gonna be your prompt for this week. Write a hot haiku sequence, and got to admit or confess or let you know that you have less time than normal. Because next week's guest in the Rattlecast is another poet from India, Siddharth Dasgupta. And given the time zones and the difficulty there, it's going to be 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. So very early show. Also timed it because I have a doubleheader in the softball league in the afternoon. But we wanted to have Siddharth on anyway, so I timed it for a week in that schedule.
Great.
But that is going to be Rattlecast number 257. Siddharth, a wonderful poet in the Ghazal issue. Also, author of a novel, a book of short stories, several books of poetry in India. His most recent book of poetry is All These Streets We've Known by Heart. So we're going to talk to Siddharth on an early show, very early time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. So I'm going to roll right out of bed, get some coffee, and start up the show. That's going to be Rattlecast 257, Sunday, August 11th. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.